After supper, we headed off to pray. I knew Judas had already betrayed me and that they would be coming for me soon. As we made our way across the Kidron Valley to the olive groves of Gethsemane, I remembered all that we had experienced together. I remember one guy who was so short, he had to climb a tree to see me. He just didn't expect me to see him. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And when the Savior looked up in that tree, and he said,
Zacchaeus was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. I'm so sick of hearing that. Do I look wee and little to you? I may be short, but I'm definitely not wee and little. But you know how these stories get started. Let me tell you what really happened. I was living in Jericho, and there started to be some ruckus about this Jesus fellow coming to town. I'd heard of him before. I mean, I'd seen all of those CNN reports about him. All of those followers of his seemed to believe that he was the Messiah or something. I wasn't so sure about that. But I always like to get a look at famous people. You see, this wasn't the first time I'd been up that tree. I had a spot in that old tree that I always went to when someone famous was coming through town. You see, I love to look at people. Over the years, I've gotten to look at Caesar, Pilate, Cleopatra, and once I even had an Elvis sighting. He came through town on a promotional tour and saying, "Love me tender," right there in the country, in the county courthouse square. But I digress. Now, where was I? Oh yeah. I was telling you about this Jesus fellow coming through town. You see, nobody who was anybody had ever even looked up at me in that old tree. I was just up there like normal, minding my own business when he arrived. He seemed to make a beeline for me. It was kind of spooky. He came right up to that old tree and called me by name. Now, if he had lived here in Jericho all his life, he might have known me. I was known by most people in the county. I was the local representative of the IRS. It was my job to make sure that everybody's 1040 was filled out correctly and all of their taxes paid on time. You might say that I was not the most popular person in town. My name might have has been up there with Colonel Sanders in a chicken coop. We both have about the same number of friends. But when he called me out of that tree, I could see friendship in his eyes. Oh, those eyes. In them, I could see a wonderful life, but also a bit of pain. He didn't let on, though. He actually wanted to go to my house for dinner. My house. I hadn't even made my bed that morning. The house was a mess, but Jesus said that he didn't care. He wasn't going to my house to inspect it, but to eat and talk with me. I still couldn't believe that this was happening. One of the most important people to come through Jericho in a long time was going to my house. I served him the most delicious meal you could imagine. We had wine and cheeses and fruit of all kind. I was going to make a ham, but then I decided that might not be kosher. So I served T-bones. They were the most impressive 20-ounce porterhouses you have ever seen. I had them cooked in the Outback Steakhouse. You know, for a skinny guy, he sure could put away some steak. He made such an impression on me. He talked to me like we had been friends for years. He made me feel like there was a place for me in his kingdom. I decided at that very moment I would change. I would start to give to the poor. I always knew that there were people out there who needed help, but I did nothing. Jesus changed all that. He knew that I was a sinner and a tax collector, but I repeat myself, he simply didn't care. He called me. He called me to be a better person and to make a change in my life. I asked him why he cared so much. He said he didn't come here to save those who were already saved. He came to save the lost. From that moment on, I knew that God had a purpose for my life. I wasn't sure what those purposes would be, but I would be willing to serve the Lord when I was needed. When Jesus called me, I heard his voice, and my life will never be the same.